At the family dinner, my parents snapped, "We're done funding your pathetic joke." Then the trust manager texted, "Approve their $50,000 allowance?" I replied, frozen. Their laughter stopped. I am 28 years old, and my life is a study in extreme contradictions. If you were to look at me right now, sitting in my cramped, poorly lit apartment on the outskirts of the city, you would probably feel a twinge of pity. The refrigerator in the corner hums with a loud, rattling noise that I have learned to tune out. The heating barely works, forcing me to wear a thick, oversized sweater just to keep my fingers warm enough to type. In front of me are two computer monitors, and they tell the story of my double life. On the left monitor is the life everyone sees. It displays the back-end code of the tech startup I founded with my best friend, Naomi Chin. We are a software engineering duo, pouring 90-hour weeks into an application that we believe could revolutionize supply chain logistics. But belief does not pay the rent. The screen shows our dwindling corporate bank account, currently sitting at a terrifying $312. We are surviving on instant ramen, cheap coffee, and pure, stubborn willpower. But then, there is the right monitor. This is the life nobody knows about. On that screen is a highly secure, encrypted banking portal. The logo at the top belongs to one of the most exclusive private wealth management firms in the country. Logged in under my credentials, the dashboard displays a single, staggering number. $20 million. I stare at the cursor blinking next to a pending transaction request. The request is from Valerie Kensington, the senior wealth manager assigned to the Prescott Family Trust. The message is simple and sterile. It reads, requesting approval for the monthly disbursement of $50,000 to the accounts of Harrison, Cynthia, and Victoria Prescott. I let out a long, exhausted sigh. Harrison and Cynthia are my parents. Victoria is my older sister, the 31-year-old golden child of the family. To them, I am Madeline Prescott, the black sheep, the stubborn fool chasing a pipe dream while living in poverty. They think they are the masters of their own destiny, wealthy socialites living large in a sprawling Atlanta mansion. They believe their luxurious lifestyle is the result of brilliant investments and a robotic, self-sustaining trust fund that magically deposits money into their accounts on the first of every month. They have absolutely no idea that the trust fund is not on autopilot. It is a blind trust, heavily modified by a specific set of rules. The lawyers set it up so my family would never know the truth behind the curtain. The truth is that every single dollar they spend, every luxury car lease they sign, every extravagant vacation they take, must be manually approved by the sole trustee. And for the past 3 years, since the day I turned 25, that trustee has been me. I look back at the left monitor. $300 left to my name. I look at the right monitor. $50,000 waiting to be handed out to people who despise me. The psychological weight of this secret is sometimes too much to bear. I am literally funding the very people who mock my poverty. I hover my mouse over the green approve button. My finger hesitates. I think about my mother's recent snide comment about my worn-out shoes. I think about my father's constant lectures about how I lack the business acumen of our family. It is a psychological trap, a bizarre social experiment I have been running from my dingy apartment. I click the button. The screen refreshes. Transaction approved. $50,000 sent. I close the secure browser, rub my tired eyes, and turn my attention back to the broken code of my startup. The irony is bitter, but I remind myself that this is exactly what grandfather wanted. To understand why a 28-year-old software engineer secretly controls a $20 million empire, you have to understand the man who built it. My grandfather was a force of nature. He grew up with nothing, worked his hands to the bone in the manufacturing sector, and eventually built a massive logistics company. He was a self-made millionaire in the truest sense of the word. He valued hard work, grit, and above all, self-awareness. Unfortunately, those traits skipped a generation. My father, Harrison, inherited grandfather's last name, but none of his work ethic. Harrison is a man who suffers from a severe case of the Dunning-Kruger effect. He genuinely believes he is a financial genius, a titan of industry, simply because he was born into money. He uses corporate buzzwords he does not understand and acts as if he built the family fortune from scratch. My mother, Cynthia, is his perfect match, a woman whose primary talents are social climbing, hosting extravagant charity galas, and spending money she never earned. I remember grandfather's funeral 3 years ago like it was yesterday. The rain was pouring down, matching the heavy, somber mood of the cemetery. I was 25, standing near the back of the tent, trying to hold back tears. I looked over at my parents. Harrison and Cynthia were not mourning. They were whispering to each other, and I caught snippets of their conversation. They were already discussing a European vacation and renovations to the mansion. They were acting like they had just won the lottery. But grandfather was always 10 steps ahead. A few months before he passed, when his health was rapidly declining, he called me into his study. The room smelled of old leather and pipe tobacco. He looked frail, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "Madeline," he had said, his voice raspy but firm. "Your father is a fool. He thinks wealth is a personality trait. He thinks the money will just keep printing itself. He does not understand the value of a dollar because he has never had to trade his sweat for one." I had sat there quietly, knowing he was right. My sister, Victoria, was no different. She was already modeling herself after our parents, demanding designer clothes and acting superior to everyone around her. "I am establishing a trust," grandfather continued. $20 million. It will be enough to sustain the family, but I am not leaving it to a team of faceless bankers to manage. Bankers do not care about character. I am leaving the control to you. I had been shocked. I asked him why he would give that kind of power to me, the youngest, the one everyone in the family considered a quiet weirdo who liked computers more than parties. "Because you are the only one in this bloodline who knows how to suffer," he replied, a sad smile touching his lips. "You chose to move out. You chose to live in a cheap apartment. You chose to build something from nothing. You have my hands, Madeline. The rest of them just have my wallet." The conditions of the trust were ironclad. Upon his death, the money would be locked. The family would be told that a legal team was managing it, distributing a monthly allowance to keep them comfortable. But in reality, Valerie Kensington, the wealth manager, answered only to me. I had the power to approve the funds, increase them, decrease them, or freeze them entirely. Grandfather had given me one final piece of advice. Do not cut them off immediately. Let them show you who they really are. Give them enough rope, and see if they build a bridge, or if they hang themselves with their own arrogance. For 3 years, I have followed his advice. I have lived in poverty while funding their luxury, waiting to see if they would ever change. The answer, of course, was no. They did not change. If anything, the guaranteed monthly income only amplified their worst traits. The lifestyle creep was real and aggressive. What started as buying nicer clothes turned into leasing luxury cars every year, which turned into hiring private chefs for casual weekend dinners. It was the afternoon, 3 days before our mandatory monthly family dinner, when my phone rang. The caller ID flashed Victoria's name. I let it ring 3 times, taking a deep breath to brace myself before answering. "Hello, Victoria," I said, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. It is a psychological technique I learned called gray rocking. When dealing with a narcissist, you give them nothing emotional to latch onto. You become as boring and unresponsive as a gray rock. "Madeline," finally. Victoria sighed loudly into the receiver, making sure I knew how terribly I had inconvenienced her by not picking up on the first ring. "Listen, I am swamped today. I have a massive showing for a penthouse downtown. Multi-million-dollar listing. You know how it is." I did not know how it was. Victoria loved to call herself a top-tier real estate agent, but the reality was far less glamorous. She got her real estate license years ago, but she barely worked. She relied entirely on the social connections our parents bought and the trust fund allowance I secretly approved to maintain the illusion of being a highly successful businesswoman. She spent more money on marketing her own image than she ever made in actual commissions. "Since you do not have a real job anyway," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with that familiar, casual condescension, "I need you to do me a massive favor. I need you to go to the boutique in Buckhead and pick up my dry cleaning. It is the silk dress I am wearing to the family dinner on Friday. They will not release it without someone paying the bill, and my assistant called in sick. She wanted me to be her errand girl. She was calling her sister, a software engineer working 80-hour weeks to build a company, to go pick up a dress because she deemed my time completely worthless. The bill is about $200, she added offhandedly. Just put it on your card, and I will reimburse you later. That was a lie, and we both knew it. Victoria never reimbursed anyone. She viewed other people's money as an extension of her own. For a split second, the anger flared hot in my chest. I looked at my bank account balance again. $300. Paying for her dry cleaning would leave me with barely enough to buy groceries for the week. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to tell her that I was the reason her platinum credit card had not bounced that very morning. But I remembered grandfather's voice. Let them show you who they really are. Sure, Victoria, I said, my voice flat and emotionless. I will pick up the dress. Oh, perfect. You are a lifesaver, Maddie. Make sure you do not wrinkle it in that awful, dirty car of yours. See you Friday. She hung up without saying thank you. I set the phone down on my desk, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. Naomi, my co-founder, rolled her chair over from her desk. She had heard the entire conversation. Let me guess, Naomi said, raising an eyebrow. The golden child needs something and you have to pay for it? Dry cleaning, I muttered, grabbing my keys. $200. Madeline, you have got to stop letting them treat you like a doormat, Naomi said gently. You are brilliant. We are going to land this funding, and you will never have to deal with their snobbery again. I smiled a weak, tight smile. Naomi knew about my awful family, but she did not know about the trust. Nobody did. It was a burden I carried completely alone. I grabbed my worn-out coat and headed out the door to run an errand for the sister whose entire fake empire rested in the palm of my hand. The family dinner on Friday was going to be unbearable, but I had no idea it was going to be the night everything finally shattered. Friday evening arrived with a cold, biting wind. I pulled my 10-year-old sedan up to the massive wrought iron gates of the Prescott family mansion in the wealthiest neighborhood of Atlanta. The gates swung open slowly, revealing the sprawling estate. It looked less like a home and more like a country club. The driveway was lined with manicured hedges and softly glowing landscape lights. Parked near the entrance were the symbols of their financial delusion. My father's brand new imported sports car, a ridiculous midlife crisis machine that cost more than my entire startup's initial operating budget. Next to it was Victoria's oversized luxury SUV, gleaming flawlessly under the security lights. I parked my rusted, rattling car as far away from theirs as possible, not wanting to deal with the inevitable comments about how my vehicle was an eyesore. I walked up the sweeping stone steps. Before I could even ring the bell, the heavy mahogany door was pulled open by one of the hired catering staff. The smell of expensive roasted meats and rich wine drifted out, making my stomach rumble loudly. I had eaten half a sandwich for lunch to save money. Madeline. You made it. I looked up to see my mother, Cynthia, descending the grand staircase. She was draped in cashmere and wearing a string of pearls that I had personally approved the funds for just 6 months ago. She looked me up and down, her smile tight and practiced. It was the kind of smile she used on charity cases. Hello, Mother, I said, stepping inside. The house was overly warm, buzzing with the quiet activity of the caterers setting up the dining room. I see you are still wearing that comfortable sweater, Cynthia remarked, her eyes lingering on a small frayed thread near my cuff. I thought perhaps after all these years, you might want to dress up a little for a family occasion. Victoria is wearing the most stunning silk piece. Speaking of which, I assume you brought it? Yes, I handed it to the maid, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Good. Well, come into the living room. Your father wants to speak with you before dinner. Cynthia turned gracefully and glided away, expecting me to follow like an obedient puppy. I took a deep breath, steeling my nerves. The psychological warfare in this house was exhausting. They did not communicate, they merely performed. They performed wealth, they performed success, and they used me as the negative space in their perfect portrait. By keeping me around to mock, they elevated their own status. I was the cautionary tale they told their wealthy friends. Oh, our youngest, Madeline? Bless her heart, she is still struggling with some little computer project in a bad part of town. We try to help her, but you know how stubborn children can be. It was a brilliant, toxic narrative. It made them look benevolent and made me look like an ungrateful failure. I walked through the grand hallway, my cheap sneakers squeaking slightly on the imported marble floors, heading straight into the lion's den. The living room looked like a set from a movie about old money. Leather armchairs, a roaring fireplace, and walls lined with books that no one in the house had ever actually read. My father, Harrison, was standing by the wet bar, pouring himself a generous glass of scotch. He was wearing a tailored suit, looking every bit the part of a successful patriarch. "Madeline," he boomed, gesturing for me to sit in one of the oversized armchairs. "Have a drink. Actually, never mind, you are probably driving that hazard of a vehicle home tonight." I sat down, crossing my arms defensively. "Hello, Dad." He took a sip of his scotch, swirling it in the crystal glass, and looked down at me. "So, let us talk about this little hobby of yours. How is what do you call it? The app?" "It is a logistics optimization platform," I corrected him quietly. "And it is a company, not a hobby." Right. "A company," he chuckled, a deep, patronizing sound. "Tell me, Madeline, what is your current burn rate? How is your customer acquisition cost looking this quarter?" He loved doing this. He loved throwing out business terminology he had read in magazines to assert his dominance. He had never built a company. He had never managed a payroll. The closest he ever came to a hard day's work was arguing with his golf instructor. Yet, he spoke to me as if I were a foolish intern. "We are currently seeking our seed round of funding," I said, sticking to the facts, refusing to give him ammunition. "We have a solid pitch, and we are talking to several venture capital firms." "Venture capital," Harrison scoffed, shaking his head. "Madeline, you are 28 years old. You're playing a young man's game with zero leverage. In the real world of business, you need tangible assets. You need real estate. Look at your sister. Victoria is closing deals left and right. She understands the market. You are sitting in a dark room typing on a keyboard, hoping some billionaire hands you a check. It is pathetic." His words stung, despite my mental armor. It is exhausting to have your life's work dismissed by someone whose entire existence is funded by your secret charity. "I understand you have different views on business, Dad," I said, utilizing the gray rock method again. "It is not a view, Madeline, it is reality," he snapped, his face turning slightly red. "You are embarrassing yourself. And frankly, you are embarrassing this family. People ask me what my youngest daughter is doing, and I have to tell them she is practically begging for scraps on the internet. It is time you give up this childish dream, get a real job, and start acting like a Prescott." I looked at him, truly looked at him. I saw the weakness behind his bluster. I saw a man terrified of his own irrelevance, desperately trying to tear down his daughter to feel tall. "I will keep that in mind," I said softly. He huffed, clearly disappointed that I had not argued back, denying him the fight he wanted. "Dinner is in 10 minutes, he muttered, turning his back to me to pour another drink. "Do not ruin it by talking about your failing project." I stood up, feeling a tight knot of anxiety and anger twisting in my stomach. I needed a moment to breathe. I excused myself and headed down the hall toward the guest bathroom. I locked the bathroom door, leaned against the cool marble vanity, and pulled out my phone. The opulent surroundings felt suffocating. I opened my messaging app and texted Naomi. "Currently hiding in the bathroom. The patriarch has already declared our company a pathetic joke. How are things on your end?" Naomi replied almost instantly. "Just finished debugging the server issue." "Ignore him, Maddie. He doesn't know what he's talking about." "Did you check your email? Any word from Apex Capital?" My heart sank. Apex Capital was the venture capital firm we had pitched to 2 weeks ago. The meeting had gone incredibly well. The lead investor, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah, had loved our prototype. She told us to expect a term sheet within a few days. But then, Nothing. Total silence. Ghosted. I opened my email app. My inbox was empty, save for some promotional spam. No, I typed back to Naomi. Still nothing. I am going to send one final follow-up email right now. If they don't reply, we have to assume the deal is dead and we are officially out of runway. I opened a new draft. My hands were shaking slightly. This email was our last lifeline. If Apex didn't invest, Naomi and I would not be able to pay for the server costs next month. The startup would die. I typed out a careful, professional message. Dear Sarah, I am writing to follow up on our meeting regarding the seed funding for our logistics platform. We are currently moving forward with other conversations, but wanted to check in with Apex Capital one last time before making any final decisions. We remain very excited about the possibility of partnering with your firm. Please let us know your current standing. Best regards, Madeline Prescott. I stared at the screen for a long time. The desperation felt thick in my throat. I hit send. I splashed some cold water on my face, patted it dry with a ridiculously plush monogram towel, and stared at my reflection. I looked tired. I looked like a woman carrying a $20 million secret while slowly starving to death. A sharp knock on the door startled me. Madeline, Victoria's voice called out from the hallway, dripping with impatience. Are you going to hide in there all night? Dinner is being served, and we are not waiting for you. I am coming, I called back, my voice steady. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, unlocked the door, and walked out to join my family. I had no idea that the email I had just sent was about to act as the catalyst for the absolute destruction of the Prescott family illusion. The trap was fully set, and my parents were about to walk right into it with their eyes wide open. Thank you for following the story up to this point. If you found the story interesting, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the name of the city you live in. Every comment helps the video reach more viewers. Thank you very much. Now let's return to the exciting events at the dinner table. The dining room was a masterclass in aggressive intimidation masked as hospitality. A massive mahogany table anchored the room, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the light from the dripping crystal chandelier above. The caterers had set the table with the family's finest imported china, heavy silver cutlery, and tall crystal wine glasses. As I took my seat at the far end of the table, purposely placing myself as far away from the center of attention as possible, I could smell the rich, savory aroma of roasted lamb and garlic herbs. Victoria swept into the room a few minutes later, wearing the exact emerald green silk dress I had picked up from the dry cleaners just hours prior. She looked flawless, her hair styled in loose, expensive waves. She did not even acknowledge me as she sat down across from our mother. Cynthia beamed at her, instantly showering her with compliments about how radiant she looked. Harrison sat at the head of the table, pouring a vintage French wine that I knew for a fact cost $800 a bottle. I knew this because I had approved the invoice for the wine cellar restocking just last month. The caterers brought out the first course, a delicate scallop appetizer. Almost immediately, Victoria took center stage. So, Daddy, Victoria began, her voice loud and entirely too cheerful. I wanted to wait until we were all together to share the good news. I am officially in the final negotiation stages for the downtown luxury condominium project. The developer practically begged me to take the exclusive listing. We are talking a 7-figure commission here. 7 figures. Harrison raised his wine glass in a toast, a look of immense pride washing over his face. That is my girl, he declared. I always knew you had the Prescott business instinct. A 7-figure deal before you are 32. That is what success looks like. Cynthia clapped her hands together lightly. Oh, Victoria, we must celebrate. Perhaps a shopping trip to New York next weekend? We can stay at the plaza. Of course, Victoria said, taking a sip of her wine. I deserve a little treat after working so hard. I sat quietly, cutting a small piece of my scallop. It was a fascinating psychological display. I knew the truth about Victoria's condominium project. I had seen her financial statements through the Trust's Oversight Committee. She was not the lead agent. She was a junior partner who had begged her way onto the team through one of Harrison's country club connections. Her actual cut of that commission, if the deal even closed, would barely cover the minimum payments on her maxed-out credit cards. The shopping trip to New York would not be paid for by her hard work. It would be paid for by the $50,000 monthly allowance I had approved earlier that afternoon. Victoria noticed my silence and turned her sharp gaze toward me. Her lips curled into a condescending smirk. "And what about you, Madeline?" Victoria asked, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "How is your little internet project going? Still working out of that depressing apartment? Tell me, have you made a single dime yet?" I chewed my food slowly, swallowing before I spoke. "We are currently in the final stages of securing our seed funding round," I said, keeping my voice perfectly even. "We had a very promising meeting with a major venture capital firm 2 weeks ago. We are expecting their term sheet any day now." Victoria laughed, a sharp, cutting sound that echoed in the large room. "A promising meeting," she mocked. "Madeline, anybody can have a meeting. Real business is about closing. Real business is about putting money in the bank. You are 28 years old, and you are still playing pretend. Do you even know how many zeros are in a 7-figure deal? Because I do not think your little app is ever going to see that kind of money." Harrison nodded in agreement, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. "Your sister is right, Madeline. You lack the killer instinct. You are too soft, too focused on the technical nonsense instead of the bottom line. You cannot code your way to wealth. You need to understand the market, and frankly, you just do not have what it takes." The echo chamber was fully active now. They were feeding off each other, building themselves up by systematically attempting to tear me down. I looked around the table at the three of them. They were so incredibly certain of their superiority. They were so blindly confident in their own fabricated reality. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I just took another bite of my dinner, letting their insults wash over me, knowing that the foundation of their entire world rested entirely in my hands. The main course was served, but the hostility in the room only thickened. It seemed that my lack of an emotional reaction was infuriating them. Narcissists hate being ignored. They need a reaction to validate their attacks. Because I was giving them nothing but polite silence, they decided to escalate. Harrison set his crystal wine glass down on the table with a loud, sharp clink. The sound cut through the ambient classical music playing softly from the hidden speakers. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the polished wood, his face pulling into a stern, authoritative scowl. "We need to talk about your future, Madeline," Harrison announced, his voice booming with forced authority. "Or rather, your complete lack thereof. Your mother and I have been discussing this for weeks, and we have reached a decision." Cynthia placed her hand delicately over his, nodding in solemn agreement. "We are doing this because we love you, Madeline. Because we want what is best for you." I set my fork down, folding my hands in my lap. I braced myself. "Here it comes. You have wasted 3 years on this ridiculous startup fantasy," Harrison continued, his tone turning remarkably cold. "You live in a dangerous neighborhood. You dress like a college student who cannot afford laundry detergent. You are an embarrassment to the Prescott name. We thought if we let you struggle, you would eventually learn your lesson and come back to reality. But clearly, you are too stubborn for your own good." He paused for dramatic effect, looking at me as if I were a stain on his expensive rug. "So, we are cutting the cord," he declared. "We are done funding your pathetic joke. We are not your bank anymore, Madeline." The sheer, breathtaking irony of his statement almost made me laugh out loud. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep a straight face. He genuinely believed that the small trust fund dividend I had occasionally allowed them to pass off as a gift to me over the years was the only thing keeping me afloat. He believed he was the one holding the purse strings. Effective immediately, Cynthia chimed in, her voice attempting to sound maternal, but failing miserably. "You are to pack up that awful apartment and move back here. We have spoken to Victoria, and she has graciously agreed to let you work as her personal assistant. You can manage her schedule, pick up her dry cleaning, run her errands. It will teach you the value of real, hard work." Victoria leaned back in her chair, a triumphant, wicked smile spreading across her face. "It is an entry-level position, of course. Minimum wage. but you will get to see how a real businesswoman operates. Consider it an internship in reality. If you do a good job fetching my coffee, maybe I will let you sit in on a real estate closing someday." I looked at my sister, then at my mother, and finally at my father. They were serious. They had orchestrated this entire dinner specifically to humiliate me, to break my spirit, and to force me into a life of servitude under Victoria. They wanted to strip away my independence so I could become a permanent prop in their theater of fake wealth. "If you refuse," Harrison warned, pointing a finger at me, "you will not see another dime from this family. Not for rent, not for food, not for anything. You will be completely on your own, and when your little computer company goes bankrupt, do not come crying to us. We will not bail you out." They sat there, staring at me, waiting for me to break down. They expected tears. They expected begging. They expected me to apologize for being a failure and thank them for their cruel generosity. They thought they had finally put the black sheep in her place. I did not cry. I did not beg. I simply looked at Harrison, meeting his cold, arrogant stare with absolute, unwavering calm. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Dad?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying clearly across the large table. "Are you certain you want to cut all financial ties?" "Absolutely certain," Harrison snapped, crossing his arms. "It is time you learned how the real world works." Silence descended upon the dining room, thick and heavy. The only sounds were the soft clinking of Victoria's fork against her plate as she casually resumed eating, completely unfazed by the brutal emotional execution her parents had just attempted on her younger sister. I sat perfectly still. I did not reach for my water. I did not look away. I just let the silence stretch, allowing the sheer weight of their arrogance to fill the space. Then I felt it. A sharp, distinct vibration against my thigh. My phone was buzzing in my pocket. I broke my gaze from my father, slowly reaching into my worn denim jeans to pull out the device. "Put that away," Cynthia scolded immediately, her tone sharp and annoyed. "We are having a serious family discussion, Madeline. It is incredibly rude to check your phone at the dinner table." I ignored her. I unlocked the screen, shielding it slightly from their view. The notification was from Valerie Kensington, the wealth manager of the Prescott Family Trust. My heart began to beat a little faster, a slow, steady thudding against my ribs. I tapped the message to open the secure communication application. The text was brief, professional, and devastatingly timed. "Valerie Kensington, urgent approval required. The annual property taxes for the Atlanta mansion are due by midnight tonight to avoid severe municipal penalties. Additionally, Victoria's secondary business line of credit requires immediate capital injection to prevent default. Total requested transfer from the main trust accounts, $100,000. Do you authorize the disbursement?" I read the numbers twice. $100,000. A massive sum of money, demanded by the very people who had just spent the last 20 minutes telling me I was a worthless beggar. The mansion they were currently sitting in, the roof over their heads, was hours away from tax penalties. Victoria's highly successful real estate career was apparently teetering on the edge of credit default. Their entire glittering world was built on a foundation of massive, terrifying debt, and they were entirely reliant on the trust fund to sweep it away every month. I looked up from the screen. Harrison was glaring at me, tapping his fingers impatiently on the table. Victoria was rolling her eyes, whispering something to Cynthia that made my mother let out a short, mocking laugh. They thought they were the kings and queens of the world. They had absolutely no idea that the executioner was sitting right across from them, holding a small digital device. "Madeline," I said, "put the phone away," Harrison barked, his face turning a darker shade of red. "You are showing exactly why you cannot succeed in business. You have zero respect for authority." I looked right at him. My thumb hovered over the digital keyboard on my screen. I remembered grandfather's words in his study. "Let them show you who they really are. Give them enough rope." They had taken the rope. They had tied the knot. They had placed it firmly around their own necks. I looked down at the screen and began to type my response to Valerie. Authorization denied. Freeze all family asset accounts immediately. Halt all scheduled disbursements. Suspend all credit lines attached to the trust. Do not release a single dollar. I read the sentence one last time to ensure there were no typos. My pulse was rushing in my ears, but my hands were completely steady. I pressed the blue send button. The message vanished, flying through the cellular network, instantly triggering a chain reaction of financial lockdowns across multiple banking institutions. The Prescott family was now, legally and practically, completely cut off. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and picked up my wine glass. I took a slow, deliberate sip of the expensive French wine they had bought with my money. I set the glass down and looked at my family. I understand your position, I said, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. I appreciate you being so clear about where we stand financially. Harrison smirked, leaning back in his chair, believing he had won. Good. I am glad we finally understand each other. Now, finish your dinner and tomorrow morning you can start moving your things into Victoria's garage. I did not reply. I just sat there, waiting for the reality to hit. The dinner from hell was about to get a very unexpected dessert. 20 minutes passed. The tension in the room had shifted from aggressive hostility to a smug, suffocating complacency. Harrison and Cynthia were chatting lightly about their upcoming country club golf tournament, completely satisfied with their perceived victory. Victoria was busy texting on her phone, occasionally letting out a self-important sigh, likely pretending to manage her fake luxury deals. I sat quietly, counting the seconds in my head, knowing that the financial freeze I had just initiated would take a few moments to propagate through the banking systems. The caterers cleared the main course plates and began serving dessert, a beautifully plated raspberry panna cotta. Just as Cynthia picked up her silver dessert spoon, a sharp, authoritative ringing echoed through the grand hallway. Someone was at the front door. Cynthia frowned, looking at the antique grandfather clock in the corner. Who on earth could that be at 8 o'clock on a Friday evening? We are not expecting anyone. Harrison waved a hand dismissively. It is probably a courier for one of Victoria's real estate documents. Let the maid handle it. We heard the heavy front door open, followed by the quiet murmur of voices in the foyer. A few seconds later, the dining room doors swung open. It was not a courier. Valerie Kensington stepped into the room. She was a woman in her mid-40s, sharply dressed in a tailored charcoal gray business suit, her hair pulled back into a severe, no-nonsense bun. She carried a thick, black leather briefcase. Her expression was entirely devoid of warmth. She looked exactly like what she was, a high-level wealth manager who did not have time for pleasantries. Cynthia immediately stood up, her face flashing with indignation at the intrusion. "Excuse me, who let you in? This is a private family dinner. We do not accept unannounced solicitors." Valerie ignored my mother completely. She did not even look at her. Instead, her sharp eyes scanned the room until they locked onto me. She walked past the empty chairs, the crystal glasses, and the shocked faces of my parents, stopping directly next to my seat at the end of the table. "Good evening, Madeline," Valerie said, her voice crisp and professional. "I apologize for the intrusion, but given the severity of your instructions, the legal department required physical signatures to finalize the immediate asset freeze protocol." The dining room went dead silent. The kind of silence that rings in your ears. Harrison stood up now, his napkin falling to the floor. His face was a mixture of absolute confusion and rising anger. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded loudly. "Who are you? And why are you speaking to my daughter?" Valerie finally turned her attention to my father, though her expression remained completely impassive. "I am Valerie Kensington, Senior Managing Director at Vanguard Private Wealth. I oversee the Prescott Family Trust." Harrison's confusion deepened. "The trust? But we deal with a legal team in New York. We do not have a wealth manager. And you certainly do not report to Madeline. She is nobody. She has nothing to do with our finances." Valerie opened her leather briefcase with a sharp click, pulling out a thick stack of legal documents printed on heavy watermarked paper. She laid them flat on the table, right next to my uneaten dessert. "Mr. Prescott," Valerie said smoothly, "I assure you, I am the primary manager of the trust. And I report exclusively to the sole designated trustee." She gestured toward me. Madeline Prescott. Victoria let out a loud, mocking laugh, slamming her hand on the table. This is a joke, right? Madeline put you up to this. This is some kind of pathetic prank because she is mad we cut off her allowance. Do you honestly expect us to believe that the girl wearing a $5 sweater controls $20 million? Valerie did not blink. This is not a prank, Miss Prescott. I am here to execute a legally binding directive. As of 20 minutes ago, the sole trustee has denied the authorization for the $100,000 disbursement required for the mansion's property taxes and your personal business credit line. Furthermore, all accounts, allowances, and credit facilities attached to the Prescott Trust have been permanently frozen. The silence returned, but this time it was not confused. It was the terrifying, breathless silence of a sudden, catastrophic freefall. Harrison's face strained of color so fast he looked as though he might faint. He gripped the edge of the mahogany table, his knuckles turning white. That is impossible, he stammered, the booming confidence entirely gone from his voice. My father set up that trust. It runs automatically. It is ironclad. It provides for us. Valerie slid the top document toward him, tapping a specific paragraph highlighted in yellow. Your father did set up the trust, Mr. Prescott. And it is ironclad. Specifically, Section 4, Paragraph B, which states that upon Madeline Prescott's 20th birthday, she assumes sole, unquestionable, and absolute discretionary control over all assets, disbursements, and investments within the trust. You have never had an automatic allowance. Every single dollar this family has spent for the last 3 years has been manually approved by your youngest daughter. Cynthia let out a small, strangled gasp, bringing a trembling hand up to clutch her expensive pearl necklace. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a sudden, dawning horror. Madeline? You? You have been controlling the money? I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back. The wood scraped loudly against the marble floor. I looked at the three of them, shedding the quiet, passive demeanor I had worn for years. For 3 years, I said, my voice ringing clear and sharp in the large room. For 3 years, I have lived in a freezing apartment, eating instant noodles, while funding your absolute delusion. I approve the lease for your sports car, Dad. I approve the funds for your charity galas, Mom. I approve the safety net that catches Victoria every single time she fails to close a real estate deal. Victoria's face contorted into an ugly mask of rage. You are lying. She screamed, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. You do not have that kind of money. You are a failure. You are a beggar. Right on cue, as if orchestrated by the universe itself, Victoria's cell phone began to vibrate violently against the wooden table. Then it beeped. Then it beeped again. A cascade of notifications lit up the screen. She snatched the phone up, her eyes scanning the screen. Her breath hitched. What is this? She whispered, her voice cracking. I did not need to see the screen to know what it said. Your business credit card has been declined, I stated calmly. Your secondary checking account is frozen due to insufficient funds. The backup transfer from the trust has been rejected. Victoria stared at her phone, her hands shaking violently. No. I have a client dinner tomorrow. I have marketing fees drawing automatically at midnight. If those bounce, my broker will drop me. Madeline, turn it back on. Turn it back on right now. Harrison rounded the table, marching toward me with his fists clenched, though there was real fear in his eyes. You cannot do this to us, Madeline. This is our house. This is our money. You're stealing from your own family. You will authorize those payments immediately, or I will drag you into court and have you removed as trustee. Valerie stepped slightly in front of me, a protective barrier of legal steel. You have no standing to sue, Mr. Prescott. The trust is completely discretionary. Madeline has zero legal obligation to disburse funds to any beneficiary. If you attempt to litigate, you will be funding your lawyers entirely out of pocket. And given that your primary checking accounts were just frozen, I highly doubt you can afford a retainer. Harrison stopped dead in his tracks. The reality was finally crashing down on him. The giant, imposing patriarch was suddenly reduced to a terrified man standing in a house he could not afford to pay the taxes on. "Madeline, please," Cynthia cried, tears finally spilling over her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. "We are your family. We took care of you. We were just trying to push you to be better. We did not mean those things we said earlier. It was tough love. Please, you cannot let them take the house. Where will we go?" I looked at my mother. I saw the desperate manipulation in her eyes. She was still trying to play the game, still trying to gaslight me into feeling guilty for the consequences of her own actions. I might have felt a shred of pity. I might have reconsidered if my phone had not buzzed at that exact moment. I pulled my phone from my pocket. It was an email notification. I glanced at the screen, expecting another automated update from Valerie's banking software. But it wasn't. The sender was Sarah from Apex Capital, the lead venture capitalist we had been desperately waiting to hear from. The subject line read, "Urgent, regarding your funding application." My heart skipped a beat. For a brief second, I forgot about the chaos in the dining room. I opened the email, praying for a term sheet, praying for the lifeline my startup needed. I read the text. My blood ran completely cold. "Dear Madeline," the email began. "It is with deep regret that we must formally withdraw our consideration for your seed funding round. Your technical presentation was excellent, but Apex Capital has a strict policy regarding the character and integrity of our founders. Yesterday afternoon, I received a highly concerning phone call from your sister, Victoria Prescott. She informed me, on the record, that your company is currently under private investigation for financial fraud, and that you have a documented history of severe mental instability and theft from your own family. While we cannot verify these claims, the potential legal and reputational risk is simply too high for our firm to ignore. We wish you the best of luck elsewhere. Sarah." I stood there, staring at the glowing screen. The words blurred together. My startup, my dream, the company Naomi and I had bled for over the last 3 years, was dead. It wasn't dead because the market rejected it. It was dead because my own flesh and blood had actively reached out to sabotage it. I looked up. The room was still. Harrison, Cynthia, and Victoria were watching me, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to give them their money back. I walked slowly over to Victoria. I stopped inches from her face. She tried to maintain her arrogant sneer, but I saw the sheer terror vibrating in her eyes. I held my phone up, turning the screen so she could see the email from Apex Capital. "You called them," I said. My voice was no longer calm. It was a dangerous, hollow whisper. "You found out who my investors were, and you called them. You told them I was a fraud. You told them I was unstable. You destroyed my company." Victoria swallowed hard, taking a step back. She looked at our parents, panic setting in. I had to, Madeline. You do not understand. I was at a networking event, and people were asking about you. Your little app is a joke. It was going to fail anyway, and when it did, it would drag the Prescott name through the mud. I was protecting our brand. I was protecting the family. She admitted it. She didn't even try to deny it. She just tried to justify her unthinkable sabotage. I turned to my parents, waiting for the outrage. Waiting for Harrison to scream at Victoria for crossing a line that should never be crossed. Waiting for Cynthia to realize the monster she had raised. But the outrage never came. Harrison cleared his throat, adjusting his tie nervously. "Now, Madeline, let us be reasonable. Victoria should not have interfered, perhaps, but her intentions were in the right place. We have a reputation to uphold in this city. Your project was highly risky. It is better that it ends now before you embarrass us publicly." Cynthia nodded vigorously, wiping her tears. "Yes, exactly. Victoria is your older sister. She was just looking out for the family's best interests. Now, please, let us put this ugliness behind us. Just tell the manager to unfreeze the accounts, and we can all go back to normal. We can forget this ever happened." I stared at them. They were not human. They were empty, hollow shells wearing expensive clothes. They had just found out that their golden child had maliciously destroyed my entire life's work, and their only reaction was to defend her and beg for their allowance. There was no love here. There was no family. There was only a parasitic disease, and it was time to cut it out completely. I turned away from my parents and faced Valerie. The wealth manager was standing perfectly still, holding out a silver pen and the final authorization document. The document that would make the freeze permanent and redirect all future trust dividends entirely into a corporate holding account under my name. Where do I sign? I asked, my voice steady, ringing with an absolute, unshakable finality. Valerie pointed to a line at the bottom of the page. Right here, Miss Prescott. No, Harrison shouted, lunging forward. He grabbed my arm, his grip bruising and desperate. You cannot do this. You are ruining us. You are a spiteful, ungrateful child. I ripped my arm out of his grasp with such force that he stumbled backward, crashing into one of the heavy dining chairs. Do not ever touch me again, I said, staring him down until he lowered his eyes. I am not ruining you. I am simply giving you exactly what you asked for 20 minutes ago. You said you were not my bank anymore. Well, congratulations. I am not your bank anymore either. I took the silver pen from Valerie. I bent over the table and signed my name with a swift, aggressive flourish. Madeline Prescott. The ink dried. It was done. The $20 million safety net was officially pulled away. Valerie closed her leather briefcase, the sharp snap echoing like a gunshot. The legal directives have been executed. Good evening. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the dining room, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floors until the heavy front door closed behind her. I did not say goodbye. I did not look at my mother, who had collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. I did not look at Victoria, who was frantically dialing numbers on her phone, begging her credit card companies for an extension she would never get. I did not look at my father, who was staring blankly at the wall, a broken man. I turned and walked out of the mansion. I stepped out into the cold night air. The wind whipped through my hair, but for the first time in my life, I did not feel cold. I felt light. I felt an incredible, overwhelming sense of freedom. I walked past the leased sports cars, down the manicured driveway, and got into my rusted, 10-year-old sedan. The engine sputtered and rattled as I turned the key, but it started. I drove through the wrought iron gates, watching them close in my rearview mirror. I was leaving the illusion behind forever, ready to build something real. 6 months is a long time in the world of technology, and an even longer time in the world of consequences. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office in downtown Atlanta, looking out over the city skyline. The room behind me was buzzing with activity. Programmers were typing furiously, phones were ringing, and the large digital monitor on the wall displayed our rising user acquisition metrics. Naomi walked up beside me, handing me a cup of premium coffee. We just closed the deal with the national freight carrier, she said, a massive grin spreading across her face. We are officially profitable, Maddie. We did it. I took a sip of the coffee, smiling back. We did it. After the dinner from hell, I had redirected a portion of the trust's immense capital into my startup. We didn't need the venture capitalists anymore. We funded ourselves. With the financial stress removed, Naomi and I were able to hire a proper team, scale our servers, and launch the platform. It was an instant success. We had built something real, something that actually produced value, rather than just consuming it. As for my family, the laws of financial gravity had finally caught up with them. Without the trust fund to cover their massive liabilities, their house of cards collapsed in spectacular fashion. Within 30 days, they missed the property tax deadline. The municipal penalties stacked up, and shortly after, the bank foreclosed on the Atlanta mansion. The imported sports cars and luxury SUVs were repossessed by the leasing companies in the middle of the night. I heard through the grapevine of old family acquaintances that Harrison and Cynthia had been forced to move into a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable part of the city. Harrison tried to get a job as a financial consultant, but without his fake wealth to prop up his ego, no one would hire a 60-year-old man with zero actual experience. Cynthia was allegedly selling off her designer handbags online just to pay for groceries. They were completely alienated from their high society friends, who dropped them the second the money dried up. Victoria's fall from grace was perhaps the steepest. Her real estate broker fired her when her business credit lines defaulted and she couldn't pay her desk fees. Word spread quickly in the industry about her financial ruin, and no other luxury firm would touch her. The golden child, the woman who had mocked my poverty and tried to destroy my company, was currently working as a shift manager at a mid-tier retail clothing store in a suburban mall. I did not feel sorry for them. Grandfather was right. Money does not build character, it only reveals it. When they thought they had all the power, they chose to be cruel, arrogant, and destructive. They made their choices, and now they were living the exact life of failure they had always projected onto me. I turned away from the window, looking at the thriving company I had built with my own hands and my own resilience. I had survived the toxic echo chamber. I had taken the heavy burden of the secret trust and turned it into an engine for creation. I was finally, truly free. They tried to justify destroying my future out of twisted family pride, while happily draining the very trust fund I secretly managed for them. So, I took away the only thing they truly loved, their money. Now they are living the exact life of failure they always projected onto me. Am I the bad guy here for cutting them off completely without warning, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Would you have left them a single penny after discovering that level of betrayal from your own sister? Let me know your verdict in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our daily stories. See you in the next one.